And now time for the big story for this week. India's battery market size is estimated at $7 billion for this year. And it is expected to reach to $15 billion mark by year 2029. Industry is growing at a very fast pace at a CAGR of 16.8%. But first, let's understand what is energy storage system. What is ESS? It's a broad term used to describe any system that stores energy.
So another part of it is BESS. Well, a BESS works like a large-scale rechargeable battery storing electricity often generated from renewables when it is in abundance. It acts as a reliable backup during outages or disruptions. Well, policy measures are such as deviation settlement mechanism, grid connectivity regulations, and ancillary services are issued to ensure efficient renewable integration and grid stability. But to weigh in on this landscape and this emerging technology, we are joined by Editor-in-Chief Nikunj Dalmia.
Nikunj, thanks so much for your time. This entire space, the way it's growing at a pace of 17% CAGR. Right now, we are at $7.2 billion, but then estimation is that it will reach around about $15.7 billion by another 5 years. How do you see this entire landscape? Because the way renewable space is growing, this is also a buy space which is growing.
Look, battery storage, I think, is the real deal. And you will actually see a lot of big breakthroughs happening in the entire battery storage space. I just want to take the clock back, let's say 50, 70 years ago when data storage started. Data storage started with large room-size floppy disk. Today, you actually have data storage of trillions of GP which actually are in cloud. So the way technology is going to progress and the way capacity and investments would go in this entire battery storage space, I think is going to be incremental. So what looks like a 15-16% growth, I guess the dependence and the change in terms of the technology went from renewable to battery storage, and the dependence which actually would be there on battery storage, especially for the power sector and for energy storage, I think is going to be humongous. Today we are talking about storing power. Today we are talking about batteries taking over in EVs. Today we are talking about solar generated rooftops which are generating electricity and then they're getting stored in battery. But I think a lot of breakthrough moments actually would happen. Small device to mobile phones, a lot of places where the battery storage is going to change. Now the challenge and the opportunity is, the challenge is that this is a sector where transformational changes will happen. This is a sector where R&D cost and the CAPEX cost is high because unlike setting up a FMCG plant or unlike setting up an IT plant, IT software company, this requires large CAPEX, which requires land, labor, interest rate, government support, PLI schemes, and also a lot of R&D breakthroughs. So those are real challenges. And then the way research actually is progressing, what look like a breakthrough technology right now may actually be redundant in a couple of years. We've seen that happen, for example, in pharma. What look like a couple of breakthrough molecules today, they're becoming redundant because that's how technology has moved. We've seen that happening in IT. So I think a similar kind of a factor would be at play. The combination of what battery storage will evolve and what really would become the common storage, I think is anyone's guess. But for the moment, I think this is going to be one of the most exciting pockets in terms of where the manufacturing, the new energy and the technology breakthrough would open. I mean, billions of dollars are being spent globally just to find that right mix, that what is cost effective, what is cheap, what could be manufactured in bulk and what could be transported easy.
Right. So speaking of the cost and the challenges, while the cost is coming down, batteries still cost 50 to 70% of the total EV cost, and the BESS, so is that a viable option because it doesn't really last beyond 4 hours, right? So what are really the potential challenges there?
Okay, let's talk about some clear examples here. One of the finest examples which I always look at is look at the cost of data. And I come from a time when you actually had to pay 8 rupees for an incoming call. Incoming voice call, you had to pay almost 8 rupees. So came the phenomenon of missed call de do. But now voice is free, data is very affordable. So we are consuming data at a price which could be 99% lower than what originally it was 15 years ago. And the speed has multiplied many-fold. So I think the same kind of a factor would be at play. Another classic example here is how solar chip prices have gone down. Floppy disk storage prices have gone down. That's how technology always moves. When technology evolves And when it comes to the mass, and when adaptation happens, then mass production starts. And typically with mass production and breakthrough, cost always tends to come down. So what we are talking about, let's say 1/3 of the total battery cost for a car, you are absolutely right. But it can easily come down to 20%. Or a battery which is supposedly having a shelf life of 3 to 4 years, depending on your usage, could easily extend to 5 years. So the cost may not come down, but the entire duration of the battery life may increase.
The
so
efficacy
that
might
efficacy and the shelf life, I mean the life cycle of the battery may increase from 3 years to 5 years. I remember a conversation I had with one of the fleet providers, and his view was that it used to take 8 hours to charge a car. Now in a fast charger you can charge in 2 hours. Then soon it could be 1 hour, and soon it could be 15 minutes. That's how the battery charger and the space is actually evolving. So this is a space where I think battery cost, which is a large component of the EV cost, will actually continuously start coming down. And if you look at one clear example here is that look at the entry-level car of Tata's, the EV car, they've actually got the prices down. At a time when other car companies have increased prices, they've got the car cost down. Why? Because battery storage and the battery cost has started coming down. So what looks expensive will become affordable. What looks complicated will become easy. What looks niche right now will become mass. That's how technology progresses.
All right. Thanks very much, Nikunj, for all that elaboration on that. And
Welcome back. You're tuned into Rise with India. Well, it is that time of the show where we get you a special interaction with our RWI champion. Well, so this week we have a very special guest, and we are telling you the story of Manoj Kumar, the CEO of Nandi Foundation and the co-founder of Araku.
so from a banker to a social entrepreneur to putting Araku Coffee on the world map as one of the finest coffee in the world. In fact, in his own words, Manoj Kumar, he's described the exclusivity of Araku Coffee to a Birkin bag. This is the story of Manoj Kumar and millions of tribal farmers who have created India's first coffee that completes the seed to cup journey.
Manoj was a bright son of a hard-working middle-class family in Kerala who followed the conventional career path of becoming a banker before a sense of community called him to work deeper in the social space. He then went on to become the CEO of Nandi Foundation, one of the largest growing non-profits in the country, championing initiatives to transform lives, especially of young women and farmers.
Under his leadership, Nandi Foundation has completed 25 years of service, reaching out to over 8 million lives. But his biggest recognition came from turning a social enterprise into a luxury coffee brand that has market in Paris, Japan, Korea, Germany, US and UK. Araku Coffee that has given hopes to millions of tribal farmers.
Well, hi Manoj, welcome to Rise with India. You are a Rise with India champion this week, and very rightfully so. I mean, you have been a banker, you've been with World Bank before you actually joined Nandi Foundation as the CEO. Well, tell us what inspired you to take on this philanthropic journey, which actually turned out to, took a different turn, and it became an interesting entrepreneurial journey instead.
No, so first of all, thank you, ET Now, because when you asked me to come on this show, you are actually recognizing not what I did as far as I'm concerned. You're recognizing social entrepreneurship itself. So thank you for that. That's a fantastic recognition for the sector to know that a country's growth, country like India's growth or rise, is equally dependent on how social entrepreneurs perform. So thank you for that. This is really something that we will in Nandi be very, very proud of. So straight on the question, I think my banking stint between World Bank and IDBI, etc., was not more than a decade, especially if I had 2 years of microfinance. I did all together was less than a decade. I think when you are young, you are also foolish, and you also have the ability to take risks. I think I was quite romantic about the idea that I should go and check out working with extremely poor populations. And in fact, the transition to microfinance itself was that I shifted banking completely and went into microfinance to see if I can approximate and do business with poor. This was very early days. I'm talking 98, 97, before IPOs of microfinance came all over. That's where I got bitten by the bug of how extraordinarily satisfying is transforming people out of poverty. And I said, I'm going to push myself further and try to go into the poorest populations and see if I can reach for them. If they are not credit worthy, if they're not business worthy, then can I look at new philanthropic models? Because what I found out was they were very small scale and wanted to check that out. But honest reason, I've never felt anything more gratifying than working with extremely poor people. And that's what led me to it. Of course, being a romantic student of literature and economics growing up years, whether it's reading Dostoevsky's Russian literature or whether it's being fed on Satyajit Ray films, you always had this dream that you want to go and serve the Bharat that is away from the rising India always. So in those days, that was also something that was playing as a back burner.
All right. In fact, Mr. Manoj, entire globe has taken a note of you when PM himself spoke about you in Man Ki Baat. But tell us more about the journey. When you started, and that to be a region of Araku where it has, that red corridor, it was a peak of Naxal activity. Tell us about how did you start? How did you start winning trust of tribals? How did the entire journey go?
You're right. It was the peak of what we call the Naxal movement in Araku when I started work, talking early 2000. Anything that was in a white car, anybody which was attempting to do a developmental work, all were targets and watched and observed. Getting a mobile tower there was difficult in the 90s because it will be blown up. It had only one arterial road. I totally agree. I think some of the advantages I had, one was that I did not belong to Telangana or Andhra Pradesh. So they saw me as an outsider, so both the tribals as well as the Naxals. Second, I had a banking background, which was well known. It was known that I came from Mumbai, of all places. That's what they understood me as. And they felt that unless I had some genuine interests of serving them, the guy shouldn't be hanging here. And let me tell you, I went with only the agenda of trying to learn what's going on there and if we can have a model to solve solution, to come up with solutions. So initially, almost 3 years, I did nothing but just hang in there and just develop trust. So I would spend hours going village to village, mandal to mandal, trying to use interpreters and translators to talk to them and see how I can help them. And luckily, some wisdom somebody gave me. The initial work I did was with pregnant women and helping them in handling maternal mortality. So that kind of an approach made them trust that this guy has come for service and that he has no other political ambition. He has no other, I'm not a government spy. I still remember in one village, in a very remote village in a mandal, after a meeting, some of the tribals asked me if I can disclose whether I'm coming from India. I said, why? They said, because if you're coming from India, then we don't trust them. So that's the level of lack of understanding they had about India. I mean, it's dramatically changed now. Their coffee is sold in Kyoto, their coffee is sold in Paris. They know about it now. So I would say the transition for them was from a place that was so marginally far away from rest of India, because I used to call it a region that was falling off our map. Two, they put India on the world map. Now that was possible because I could win their trust by just continuously being transparent about my intentions and always spending more hours listening to them than talking. And I kind of think after a while, these are communities who will give their life to you. And I could understand why, whether it's the Naxal movement or any movement which went and lived there, could easily win their hearts and support. So it was just a journey of creating a theory or a paradigm of how to win trust by being honest. That's what I did. So nothing much.
Right, Manoj, tell us, Araku is a luxury brand, which is essentially a social enterprise, which is by itself is an irony. Now, it's based on the model where you distribute wealth amongst the investors and the farmers. Now, well, the value of, it upholds the value that the Nandi Foundation upholds and the investors uphold. Going ahead, if you plan to get more institutional investors on board, do you think a PE or a VC fund would, actually be able to uphold those values? Because if that has to happen, it will give rise to a new impact model where, the wealth is distributed amongst the entire value chain.
Quite a lot of good VC and PE friends, and I'm hoping all of them are watching this, because you put them on the spot with this question. All I can say is that there is nothing wrong with VC or PE funds trying to do this kind of a investment. But we never had social enterprise models showing anything that required an appetite for VC fund, to be very honest. So I will not blame entirely VC and PE for it, number one. The idea of aggressive returns and quick IRRs or very intense risk-taking appetite fueled entrepreneurs to be supported by VC and PE normally is not in investments like mine, where there has been actually initially a requirement of patient capital. It took me 15 years to be able to create this luxury brand. Typical VCP funds don't have this patience. I went on patience capital, not VC, and a kind which was extremely risky. To tell that food gathering tribals who are part hunters at one time and began agriculture only last 50 years can produce world's best coffee in a country where our coffee is not at all known in the world is something no VC should bet on. So I don't blame them for not betting then. It needed the philanthropic capital kind of stuff that I had. And then I wanted angel investors like Mr. Mahindra, Chris Gopalakrishnan, Satish Reddy, etc., which I got. Now I can tell you that having proven the model, I'm hoping VC and PE funds which have an impact focus should be able to come. We discussed this even in the board, and we have been saying that we should start talking to VC and PEs who have the appetite to create a valuation for the work so far and look at taking it to scale. I mean, I would love to look at taking Araku Coffee to, say, 100 locations in India rather than spread them to different parts of the world. Our initial focus was the coffee is so high quality that we should be present in different coffee markets of the world, which is what we did till now. But now I'm very happy to note the extraordinary excitement and appetite for the same high quality coffee in India. And people are willing to pay our price. So why not take it to, the towns in large numbers? It's a question we are of late very seriously discussing. And the precise question we discuss is, will we find a VC or a PE or a growth or an impact fund with that appetite to buy into this value system? And the jury is still out, and the answer is we didn't go knocking exactly. It's still been what they call secondary literature review. So we haven't gone to few and asked. I'll definitely let ET know.
Manoj, finally, you have been a big advocate of equitable growth. Budget is round the corner. What would be your ask from the government to promote entrepreneurial opportunities for rural India?
If you want equitable growth, you should try to see how you can reward farmers who can differentiate their produce with quality. And to me, in today's world market, one of the quality differentiator is simply a produce from India that is free of pesticide residue, which is free of chemicals that are harmful, and measure up to the definition of quality in that crop category. So if we can get farmers to, or farmer FPOs as they call it, or farmers to reach that standard and benchmark in certain commodities and agree to get export markets, we need to find out either for the entrepreneurs who work with the farmers or the FPOs themselves should be rewarded. And the reward can be in the form of huge tax holiday, can be in the form of interest-free working capital loan, or giving them interest-free working capital loans or term loans as grants if needed, to set up warehouses, to set up places where they can do processing.
All right, Manoj, thank you so much for taking the time out and coming on our show as our RWI champion. But with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Rise with India. We'll see you next week with some more interesting conversations and the top stories that are leading to India's growth.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.